Marcus Licinius Crassus was not born into glory, and he was not forged in victory. He was forged in fear. As civil war ripped Rome apart and Sulla's enemies were hunted through the streets, Crassus hid in caves, fled across provinces, and rebuilt his life from the brink of annihilation. When Sulla returned as dictator, Crassus did not return as a hero, but as an opportunist. He purchased the estates of the condemned for fractions of their worth and rebuilt them for profit. He trained slaves to fight fires and then bought burning buildings from desperate owners. In a republic that believed wealth was a sign of divine favor, Crassus became a near-mythic figure. He was not merely rich, he was wealth itself. But Rome judged men by more than coin. Pompey the Great had marched through the east, toppled kings, and returned with triumphal processions. Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon of Gaul and carved his name into the maps and legends of Europe. Crassus watched both men bathe in the adoration of soldiers and citizens alike, and he burned with a hatred more poisonous than rivalry: envy. Rome admired skill, honored courage, but worshipped conquest. Crassus, for all his power, had never truly conquered. The alliance between Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus was a moment when Rome belonged not to the Senate, nor the people, but to three men. The First Triumvirate dominated elections, controlled legislation, and bent policy to their ambitions. But even here, within the most powerful political machine of the age, Crassus felt overshadowed. He had helped Caesar clear his debts and secure Gaul. He had helped Pompey secure settlements in the east. Now he demanded a theater of his own, Syria, gateway to Persia. To govern Syria was to govern the border between worlds. To the east lay the Parthian Empire, successor to the ancient Achaemenids, and rival to Rome in wealth, cavalry, and culture. Parthian envoys negotiated as equals with Rome. Their king of kings presided over lands enriched by Silk Road trade and defended by mobile horse archers that had humbled Seleucid phalanxes. But Crassus did not study Parthia. He studied the map and saw only opportunity. Caesar conquered Gaul. Pompey conquered the east. He would conquer Parthia. The Senate did not approve the war. Many senators called it illegal. Others called it suicidal. But the Triumvirate had bent Rome before. It could bend it again. In the year 55 BCE, Crassus sailed to Syria with a mandate drawn not from law, but from ambition. There he found money, legions, and the beginning of the fate that would swallow him. In Syria, Crassus trained 7 legions and raised auxiliary cavalry. Yet even as he prepared for war, reality sent warnings. Envoys from King Artavasdes II of Armenia offered him 10,000 cavalry and a northern approach through mountain passes where Roman infantry excelled. Artavasdes reminded Crassus that Parthian cavalry was built for plains, not slopes, and that Armenian horsemen could counter Parthian cataphracts. Crassus refused. He did not wish to share victory with Armenia. He did not wish to owe glory to allies. He would conquer Parthia alone, as Pompey had done with Pontus and Judea. Then came Ariamnes, the Arabian guide. He promised Crassus a direct path across the plains to where the Parthians could be forced into battle. Crassus listened. He trusted. And so the legions crossed the Euphrates into a world Rome did not understand. The desert did not greet them with banners or fanfare. It greeted them with silence, heat, and emptiness. The land devoured water. Men marched under a sun that boiled their blood. Scouts found nothing, for Surena had already taken what he needed and abandoned what he did not. Days passed with no enemy in sight. Rome had faced Gauls who screamed and charged, and Greeks who stood shield to shield. But Parthia fought like the horizon, unseen until it chose to be seen. Crassus offered no speeches to raise morale. He had no reconnaissance reports to give his officers. He marched forward not as a general, but as a blind man in a foreign land, guided by whispers and pride. The legions reached the plains near a small town called Carrhae. The wind blew across low grass and dust, and for the first time Roman scouts saw movement in the distance. Not a battle line, but silhouettes on horseback watching. And still Crassus did not understand. He believed he had come to crush an enemy unworthy of Rome. He did not yet know that Parthia had chosen this ground long before he ever dreamed of being Alexander. Surena did not ride into battle to test Roman strength. He rode to demonstrate Parthian supremacy. Among his own people, he was already a legend, a nobleman whose army and wealth rivaled that of minor kings. But among the Romans, he would become something far more, the architect of their shame. When Parthian scouts appeared across the plains, the Romans first saw them as an annoyance, a thin screen of riders stirring dust in the distance. But those silhouettes were not scouts alone. They were the eyes of an army perfectly tailored to exploit Roman arrogance. From behind a shallow rise came the thunder of hooves, but not in the form of a traditional cavalry charge. Instead, thousands of Parthian horse archers fanned out across the landscape, their armor shimmering and their composite bows already drawn. They did not rush forward. They surrounded, circling at a distance that mocked Roman javelin and pila range. Crassus ordered the legions into a solid, hollow square, shields outward, prepared to receive shock cavalry. He expected cataphracts to slam into his ranks, where Roman discipline and close-quarters combat could dominate. But Surena had no intention of giving the legions the intimacy they required. With a gesture, the Parthian line unleashed its first volley. Arrows sliced through the dry air, hissing like serpents as they fell upon Roman shields and flesh. The composite bow, built of horn and sinew under immense tension, sang with every release. These bows were not toys of a nomadic people. They were weapons tuned to pierce armor, backed by centuries of Persian cavalry doctrine that valued mobility over mass. The Romans had fought archers before, but never like this. Never at such range, never in terrain that offered no cover, and never against an enemy that could fire while retreating, advancing, or even twisting backward in the saddle. Crassus remained convinced that the barrage would end shortly. Surely no cavalry could carry enough arrows to sustain such punishment. And then came the first true lesson of the day. Across the sand, camels lumbered forward laden with wicker crates. As soon as horse archers exhausted their quivers, they rode to the camels, restocked, and continued the storm. Rome watched its assumptions unravel. Parthia had come prepared for hours, not minutes. Inside the Roman formation, the situation deteriorated quickly. Shield arms trembled under the weight of constant impacts. Water skins ran dry in the heat. Men collapsed from exhaustion or pain as arrows struck thighs, shoulders, and faces. The Romans could not advance without breaking formation, and they could not retreat without exposing their backs to enfilading fire. Their greatest strength, tight infantry formation, became their prison. Then came the mistake that sealed their fate. Crassus, desperate to break the encirclement, ordered his cavalry forward. His son Publius commanded 1,000 Gallic horsemen, some of Rome's finest auxiliary riders, famed for their bravery and ferocity. When Publius received the order, he did not hesitate. His men spurred their horses forward, and the Parthians reacted exactly as Surena intended. They feigned panic and scattered before the charge, drawing Publius and his cavalry deeper and deeper away from the infantry square. For a moment, Publius believed victory was within reach. The Parthians seemed to be fleeing, dropping distance between themselves and the Roman infantry. But atop a low ridge, the truth revealed itself. The horse archers split apart like curtains, and behind them descended a line of armored cataphracts, horse and rider encased in steel and scale, lances gleaming beneath the Mesopotamian sun. These were not light skirmishers. They were shock cavalry designed to break infantry and annihilate pursuit. Publius attempted to withdraw and form a defensive line, but the horse archers had already sealed the circle. From the perimeter, arrows fell upon the Romans once more. From the center, cataphracts crashed into the cavalry with devastating force. Horses toppled beneath lance blows. Riders were ripped from saddles. Gallic horsemen, unable to close distance or escape, fought in desperation as the ring tightened. Publius fought with the courage of a man raised to believe in destiny. He rallied his men, formed a final defensive knot, and refused to surrender. But bravery cannot pierce armor, and no amount of Roman discipline could counter a tactic designed centuries before they were born. When the last of his companions fell and the Parthians closed over him, Publius chose death by his own hand rather than humiliation. Surena ordered the battlefield searched. Among the fallen was the son of Crassus, the glory he sought to win, and the symbol Rome believed would carry the legions eastward. His severed head was placed upon a spear. When the Parthian forces rode back toward the main battlefield, they brought it with them like a grim banner. The Romans saw it raised above the Dace. Night did not bring safety, It only brought silence, and in that silence Rome could finally hear what it had become. Not an army, but a collection of wounded men clutching shields in the dark, staring at the distant glow of Parthian campfires. Crassus attempted to speak to his officers, to salvage some form of cohesion, but what leadership could he offer now? His son was dead, his cavalry destroyed, and his legions too bloodied to mount another offensive. The tribunes argued. Some demanded immediate retreat toward the mountains. Others insisted they fortify and wait for dawn. In the end, the Romans did what broken armies always do when commanders hesitate. They moved without orders. Under cover of night, thousands abandoned the battlefield and began the march toward Carrhae and the Armenian frontier. A few officers managed to maintain small cohorts in formation, but most stragglers moved in clusters, wounded and terrified, guided only by the hope that distance alone might save them. The desert did not ease their suffering. Horses collapsed. Waterskins were empty. The cries of the wounded soon fell silent as those who could not keep pace were left behind. By the time the gray light of dawn touched the plains, the once mighty army that had marched behind Crassus was scattered like debris. Surena did not immediately pursue. He knew that fear was already fighting for him. When Parthian horsemen finally rode out in the morning sun, they found the battlefield deserted except for the dead, the dying, and the abandoned Roman artillery. They retrieved the survivors for ransom or slavery and then fanned out to locate Crassus. It did not take long. Roman tracks led toward the town of Carrhae, where the governor of the province had established defenses. For a brief moment, Crassus tasted safety. But the Armenians, who had promised support, were far beyond reach, and the Parthians were closing fast. Surena sent envoys bearing terms. Crassus was to lay down his arms and negotiate a settlement. Rome still controlled Syria and Judea, and Parthia could not afford a prolonged border war. Some Roman officers urged Crassus to accept. Others, especially Cassius, warned that it was a trap. The arguments grew heated. Pride warred with survival. Finally, Crassus agreed to meet. Each side set out with a small retinue. The Parthians were lavishly dressed, calm and confident. The Romans were worn, sunburned, and trembling. What happened next remains tangled in the accounts of Plutarch, Cassius Dio, and later historians. Some say a scuffle broke out when Crassus refused to mount a horse provided by Surena. Others say the Romans feared they would be captured and drew their swords. Still others claim the Parthians seized Crassus outright. What is certain is that in the struggle that followed, Crassus was killed. A Roman tradition later claimed that molten gold was poured into his mouth to mock his greed, though this tale likely belonged to the realm of poetic justice rather than fact. What did occur was brutal enough. The severed head of Marcus Licinius Crassus was sent east as proof that Parthia had humbled Rome. The remainder of the Roman army attempted to escape under Cassius's leadership. Some succeeded and returned to Syria. Others were hunted down in small groups. Around 10,000 legionaries were captured alive. Parthia did not slaughter them. It had a more practical use for disciplined infantry. They were transported to the eastern fringes of the empire, possibly to Margiana near the Oxus River. Chinese chronicles, strangely enough, mention encounters with foreign soldiers who fought in a shielded formation and were settled in frontier garrisons. Whether myth or truth, the idea that survivors of Carrhae may have stood guard on the far edge of the world remains one of history's intriguing footnotes. In Rome, the news of Carrhae did not merely shock the Republic. It destabilized it. The First Triumvirate no longer existed. Caesar was in Gaul, rising to unprecedented fame. Pompey held power in Rome, increasingly wary of Caesar's popularity. Crassus had been the balance between the two. With his death, there was no longer equilibrium, only a slow slide toward civil war. Within a decade, Caesar would cross the Rubicon, Pompey would fall, and the Republic would dissolve into autocracy. The ambitions of a single man in the East helped tear apart the political structure of the West. Parthia, for its part, emerged with renewed prestige. Surena attempted to translate his victory into political influence, but the Parthian court was suspicious of any man too popular. King Orodes eventually had Surena executed, proving that even the greatest victors are vulnerable to palace intrigue. Yet the legacy of Carrhae endured. For centuries afterward, Roman generals marched east with caution. The memory of horse archers circling in the desert haunted Rome through the reigns of Augustus, Trajan, and Hadrian. Carrhae was a lesson written not in